What's up and welcome to the Overstimulation Station. My name is Josh Cannon and tonight I'm going to be doing a classic album review, well, classic in my opinion at least, and that would be the Genesis album We Can't Dance, the very last album with lead singer Phil Collins, who also played drums. Now, when people think about Genesis, they usually like to break the band down into two different eras, the Peter Gabriel era and the Phil Collins era. But to me, there are a lot more eras of Genesis than just those two. My definition of the various eras of Genesis look more like this. So what we're going to be looking at is the pop years. This is the last album of the pop years. And just to give you a short history lesson about the band, rapid fire, Genesis was formed by Peter Gabriel and Tony Banks and some others in some school in England. They got onto a record label, released a few albums. Their drummer quit. They needed a new drummer, auditioned Phil Collins. He got the job. They made a few albums after that were critically acclaimed, but they never reached a mainstream success. Peter Gabriel quit the band to pursue a solo career. They looked for a new singer to replace him. When finally Phil Collins stepped out from behind the drum kit, said, "Hey guys, I can do it." He ended up getting the job, and after their guitar player quit, Steve Hackett, the Genesis that most people know of has been Mike Rutherford on guitar and bass, Tony Banks on synthesizers, and Phil Collins handling the drumming and vocal duties in the studio. So now all that's out of the way, let's break down this album. We Can't Dance came out in 1991 after a 3.5-year hiatus. This hiatus was a result of an intensive year of touring from 1986 to 1987 off of their breakthrough album Invisible Touch. During this hiatus, each of the members, Phil Collins, Mike Rutherford, and Tony Banks, all went on to pursue their own solo projects. Phil Collins released another successful CD and tour. Mike Rutherford did his work with Mike and the Mechanics, and Tony Banks released his solo album, Bank Statement. So when they all reconvened in the early 90s to do another record, they all felt very fresh and very confident about their abilities to make a good record as a result of working with other people, doing solo things, and having that time away from the band. Alright, so now I'm going to go through and just provide a track-by-track take on my opinions and my feelings on each one of these songs. Now, this album opens up with the first track called No Son of Mine. A very cool intro to this album. Not only a cool intro to an album, but a cool intro into a song in general. Now you'll hear at the beginning of the song this elephant noise. And that elephant noise is a result of a vocal manipulation or sound manipulation that Tony Banks did. Mike Rutherford was playing some guitar notes in the studio when they were jamming. Tony Banks recorded Mike's guitar through his synthesizer. He downshifted the pitch of Mike's guitar, and it results in that sound, which some people compare it to an elephant. I think it sounds like an angry guy just growling or something, which makes sense in the context of this song, No Son of Mine. When Phil Collins' vocals come in on this song, they just sound crisp and just beautiful. They sound clean and they fit the track perfectly. They lay right in there. Nick Davis did a great job producing and engineering the album. One thing I will say though, you do start to notice some age in Phil Collins' voice at this point in his career when he comes in with the first line. He's lost a bit of that raw, raspy youthfulness that you heard all throughout his prime. And now we're starting to hear a little bit of nasaliness and just some age in his voice in general. Still great performances, and the voice sounded amazing on this album, but Phil Collins' voice is just something that I will always probably be obsessed with and fascinated by, and will probably analyze more than I should. But anyway, the metronomic guitar at the beginning with that ticking of the clock in the background going, it's just it builds a suspense. And then the bass guitar kicks in with this almost synth bass-like thumpiness, and Phil Collins patented gated reverb on his drums with that kick and snare sound. That snare sounds so good on that track. The drums in general was a sound by, at that point especially, they had mastered. Phil Collins' drum sound is legendary. So by the time the chorus kicks in on this song, it is just soaring. This is such a great dark pop song, and lyrically, the title "No Son of Mine" came from Phil Collins actually humming out dummy lyrics, trying to kind of find a melody to hone in on, and just the phrase you're no son of mine" just kept coming to his mind. So he just kind of wrote lyrics around kind of that theme, what could that mean, so on and so forth. The lyrics kind of allude to some kind of domestic abuse, child leaving his parents, only to return later on to have the father reject him by saying, "You're no son of mine." Track number 2 is a song called "Jesus He Knows Me." The song starts out with this very like oriental kind of sounding synth riff played by Tony Banks. It's actually pretty cool. It's a very unique riff. Tony Banks is definitely known for that. And then the rest of the band kicks in for the intro. Then when it cues up to the verse, the song takes on this very cool, like nocturnal groove to it with these heavy synth pads that Tony Banks is famous for. I could picture, like in my mind, some cool like New York action like night scene while this verse is playing. Phil's melody and vocal performance for this song come in, and it's flawless. I mean, it fits the song perfectly. It sits right in there with the rest of the song and the music, and it just sounds really good. The chorus is driven by these almost sounding like electro harp sounding synthesizer chords that really help distinguish the chorus from the rest of the song, and that sounds really cool. The bridge of the song, it goes off into this like reggae style groove that I am honestly not a fan of. I kind of hate it when bands do that. Like these bands that are not reggae bands, they'll go into this random reggae break. Rush has been guilty of it in Spirit of Radio. It's just kind of like, I feel like at that point the band is basically saying, we didn't have anything better, so we just did this. It's almost as bad as when you're listening to like a song, usually they do this in pop music, and they're singing the chorus over and over again, and then they shift the key higher up, and then they sing the chorus in the higher key as though that's going to add some sort of more interest or suspense to the song. Country musicians do this a lot. Actually, Genesis did that in their song Invisible Touch. I think I'm starting to understand why hardcore Genesis fans hate this period of their career. Alright, so the next track we get to in the album is called Driving the Last Spike. With this track, I feel like Genesis tried to prove to everyone that, hey, we can still write really long, complex prog rock jams, but this song falls so incredibly short. Coming in at just over 10 minutes, Driving the Last Spike is a mostly boring, bland piece of music. It tries to build up to something cool in the climax of the song, but it's ultimately pretty disappointing. Unlike previous long songs in their pop career, like Home by the Sea, there's nothing musically interesting going on in the song, musically or lyrically. And I blame Phil Collins for that. Phil was sent a book about Britain's railway workers of the 19th century and how they built the railroad and some suffering that went on and this, that, and the other. And Phil thought that this would be great fodder for both lyrics and music, so he kind of spearheaded this conceptual piece about their plight. Okay, I guess that's cool. But from what I understand, he also had a lot to do with the music as well. And for most of the song, the guitars are just subdued, the synth patches sound cheap, the drums are uninspired. This song sounds so sleepy, it's almost got this like nursery rhyme quality to it. This song would fit perfectly onto like some 90s Disney movie soundtrack. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if this was the song that landed Phil Collins all that Disney work later on in his career that he would become just oh so famous for. I hate to keep harping on this song, but this was the song that made me feel like the guys in Genesis were getting old when I heard this song. Abacab would have shoved this song in a locker if both of these songs went to the same high school. Throughout the years, I've tried to make myself like this song, but I just can't. Alright, next we come to the track I Can't Dance, and despite the goofy-ass lyrics, I actually love this track. The sparsity of the instrumentation, the unique rhythm track, and Phil Collins' offbeat vocal performance really made this song stick out for me. First off, let's discuss the rhythm track. So, what happened with this song was Mike Rutherford had that opening guitar riff. So, you know, they were trying everything they could to get this song to kind of rock. Phil got behind the drum set and did the Phil Collins thing with the loud drums and all that. And it just wasn't working for the song. It wasn't really serving the song as well as it should have been. So then, around that time in the early 90s, synthesizers were starting to become equipped with these percussion sound patches that were mapped out to each of the keys on the keyboard. So you could hit a key on the keyboard and it would make like a bass drum or a snare or all these other percussion sounds. So Tony Banks got on there and started doing doom, da, doom, doom, da, doom. And with his other hand, he started doing doom, da, doom, doom, da, doom, doom. And before you know it, you get this really unique sounding fake drum rhythm track. But it's cool though. That level of experimentation is really awesome. So that's how that came about. I would also like to talk with this song about Phil Collins' vocal performance. It stands out in a few ways. Now, I could be mistaken, but I believe this is Phil Collins' only song with Genesis where you get a completely dry Phil Collins vocal. Now, what I mean by that is there are no echoes or reverbs or double-tracked vocals or anything like that. Nothing. Just straight up Phil Collins with no effects. A lot of people don't realize this, but the Phil Collins vocal effects that he used, that was like half of his sound in the 1980s. He had this very echoey vocal doubling effect on nearly every single song he ever sang on, and it was part of his sound. Much like Marilyn Manson. If you ever listen to a Marilyn Manson song, Manson has the same thing. It's this like very echoey vocal sound, and it kind of shapes the music and how he sounds on it. But on this song, you don't get any of that. On this album, entirely there's none of that. It's more natural reverbs, more, something that would sound organic and not this very, engineered 80s reverb sound. So that's interesting as well. And also just how Phil Collins sang that melody in the chorus. I can't dance, I can't talk, only... I thought that sounded so cool, like how he hit that for the like, that song's a bitch to sing in karaoke, by the way. I've tried singing it before. It's a very hard note to hit. But I remember hearing that song as a kid thinking it was some black lady singing the chorus. Like, he just delivered it in such a unique way. It just showed you that at that time period when they were making that album, Genesis still definitely had a lot of unique and fresh ideas. Track 5 is a song called Never a Time. And this song sounds like it's like the sister song to Driving the Last Spike. It's another sleepy, bland track that feels like filler, honestly. I'd love to point out at this point that there were 2 B-sides to the We Can't Dance album. There was a song called Hearts on Fire and another song called On the Shoreline. And, whoa my god, I am convinced the guys in Genesis are insane because both of those songs, both of those B-sides are way better than most of the songs on this album. Just like Do the Neurotic was left off Invisible Touch, these songs being left out in place of songs like Never a Time just blows my mind. As we get to the middle of the album, we get to the track Dreaming While You Sleep, which I gotta say is a pretty cool track. I love how the marimba at the beginning of the song, it kind of dictates the lead instrumental melody throughout the song. You don't really hear marimba in a lot of modern pop music. I like that level of experimentation. I almost felt like they took a page out of the Peter Gabriel playbook on that one. But as with Driving the Last Spike, Tony Banks' keyboard patches have never sounded cheaper than they do on this album. Which is weird, seeing as how synthesizers advanced, they got more realistic sounding patches and they started sounding better, yet, God, his keyboard patches sound awful on this record. And this particular song is a good example of that. The chorus of this song has an almost in the air tonight drum fill leading into it, and then from then on it is rock city, man, with Phil Collins belting out, "All my life you lie silently there." Sorry if I hurt your ears. But the subject of the matter of this song is so bizarre for a Genesis song. It's almost distracting how bizarre the subject matter is. It's a song about a hit-and-run driver who hits some woman and drives off and leaves the scene, and how her face haunts his dreams. And you can't really detach the imagery of those lyrics from the music itself because they're just so specific. It kind of distracts from how cool the song is. I think the direct nature of these lyrics kind of ruin it a little bit for me because it's just so weird for a Genesis song. I mean, they've done story-based lyrics in the past, but I don't know, it's such weird subject matter. It's hard for me to really describe. The next track is a song called Tell Me Why, and honestly, the only reason I don't skip this song is because of Mike Rutherford's 12-string guitar playing. He busted out the old Rickenbacker 12-string again for this song, and it gives the tune its only unique characteristic. If it wasn't for the sitar-like 12-string guitar melodies in the background of this song, then this would just sound like some generic charity marathon type song of the 1980s, not to mention the preachy lyrics. The next track on this disc is a song called Living Forever. I don't know what to make of this song. It's got an alright groove, the cheesy keyboard sounds are back in spades, but the lyrics, man. This song is basically about the frustration that I'm assuming Phil Collins has over health agencies declaring things are healthy and then they're saying they're not healthy, and I'm guessing there's a little bit of commentary on fad diets in this song. Because remember when they were talking about how milk was bad for you at one point, and then they changed it and said milk's good for you, eggs were bad for you, and then they said, oh, well, no, actually eggs are good for you. That is what this song is about. It's about how these people really don't know what they're talking about, and they're just trying to control our lives, and I'm just going to do my thing and not pay attention to it. It's like, I know the guys in Genesis were in their early 40s when they were making this record, but guys, you're not in your early 80s. Come on now. That is such an old man topic to do a song about. The lyrics kind of ruin the song for me, but the music isn't bad. But again, they left out Hearts on Fire and On the Shoreline for tracks like this. I don't understand. The next track is a song called Hold On My Heart, and this song really shows off Phil Collins' strengths when it comes to writing love songs. But don't just write this song off as another Phil Collins cheesy love ballad. This song is loaded with atmosphere, vibe, feeling. This song is smoother than silk, baby. If you ever get a chance, you need to drive down your city at night, roll the windows down, and crank this song up, and tell me you don't get goosebumps. Also, this was one of those Genesis songs that people often confuse for a Phil Collins solo song, which is really a shame because Tony Banks added a lot in the chord structure and all that, and Mike Rutherford had his contributions in the song as well. Great song, though. Track 10 is a song called Way of the World, and it's another Genesis social commentary song. They really got into that in the latter part of their pop phase. Musically, however, this song is still pretty good. The suspenseful feeling in the verse pays off nicely with a big sing-along ready chorus. Even though this is a song about war, the lyrics are vague enough not to be all in your face with the message, so I can still listen to this song without feeling like Phil is preaching to me. I highly enjoy this track. Track 11 is Since I Lost You, and it is a tribute to Eric Clapton's son who died by falling out of a window of a New York apartment complex when he was young. Before I knew any of that, though, I still liked the song. It reminds me of those old doo-wop songs like Earth Angel. It's got this real dance hall type feel to it with very reverbed out vocals and just this kind of this waltzy time change to it or whatever, tempo, whatever you want to call it. It's just a little sweet song, and it gives me feelings of sadness and nostalgia, and sometimes that's a good thing. The last track of the album is a song called Fading Lights, and man, could you have possibly made a more depressing ass song to mark the end of the Phil Collins era Genesis period? First of all, the song is called Fading Lights. Might as well have called it We're Getting Old, the band is going to end after this album, life sucks. Now, there is a part 2 to this song, you know, where it kind of picks up in the middle. It's another one of those 10-minute songs that they got on the album, but it really doesn't do much for me when it picks up. The main hook of the loud portion of the song is Tony Banks coming in with these kind of very booming synth pads a la Behind the Lines, followed by one of the weakest keyboard solos in Tony Banks' career, maybe only rivaled by the keyboard solos he did on Calling All Stations, which was the pathetic-ass follow-up to this album that was released in 1997. Now, there are some interesting growl and screech sounds at certain points in Tony Banks' keyboard solo, but ultimately it's a lackluster effort. Some fans really like this song, but I'm fairly lukewarm on it as an individual song, but it does fit perfectly with the overall sleepy sound of this album. Again, if Abacab was the rebellious teenager that was down to kick some ass, then this album is that same teenager who settled down in the suburbs, had kids, those kids have moved away, and now it's ready for a nap. So I've pretty much laid out on the table any issue I've had with the individual tracks, but one glaring problem I have with this album that I haven't really fully explained until now are the lyrics. The lyrics are probably what I like least about this album. Some songs on We Can't Dance are these very specific stories that you wouldn't expect to find on a Genesis album. For instance, the song Dreaming While You Sleep is about that hit-and-run accident where the guy talks about how he hit this woman and now he's tormented by the thought of this dead girl. On a Genesis album? Okay. Other lyrics on this album feel out of place as well, some just being downright jokey at times. Jesus, He Knows Me and I Can't Dance are such departures from the typical lyrical themes on a Genesis album. The last time Genesis tried to do comedy was the song Illegal Alien, and that song is pretty much hated by all Genesis fans and is lauded as one of their worst songs they've ever done. I myself do not like that song either. But I will say the musical strength of Jesus, He Knows Me and I Can't Dance are so intact that it really carries these songs despite their silly lyrics. Some of the other songs on We Can't Dance see Phil Collins trying his hand yet again at the social commentary thing with songs like Tell Me Why, Way of the World, and Living Forever, you know, which are about world hunger, war, and health trends. When I think of these topics, I don't think Genesis. You know what I mean? Like, I don't go to Genesis to listen to their take on, you know, politics and all this other kind of stuff, because you have to be really well informed and read up and studied to really make a commentary on that stuff in any kind of significant way. I just don't feel like Genesis was ever really that band. I feel like they were more into the experimentation and making cool sounding music, and that's what I want them for, because that's what they're best at. So, you know, I feel like the album was kind of marred by those songs lyrically. Just those random heaps of social commentary felt very out of place, and it really hindered some of the tracks on this album. With all that being said, though, if you just take this album on face value and don't try to compare it to all the other Genesis albums, it's good. But you're not going to be a Genesis fan and only like this album. You're most likely going to have already listened to all the good stuff they've done before this album, before you get to this album, because nobody listens to this album as their first Genesis album. Well, I should say not many people. So having all that kind of, all these reference points in your head before going into this album would probably make it difficult for you to really listen to it objectively. However, I think you should give it a chance. I think that there are a few songs on this album that they could have taken out and swapped in for On the Shoreline and Hearts on Fire. Do yourselves a favor and look those songs up on YouTube, especially On the Shoreline. That's one of my favorite songs from that era that did not make it onto a proper album, which is just a crime in my opinion. But anyway, that's my take on We Can't Dance. Maybe I'll cover more classic albums if you guys are into this kind of content. Let me know in the comments below what you think. Remember to subscribe. Hit that stupid reminder bell, because apparently people haven't even been seeing my videos pop up in their feeds. And yeah, let me know what your favorite Genesis songs are, or any prog rock band for that matter. Till next time, have a good rest of your night.